Happy Families podcast. It's the podcast for the time-poor parent who just wants answers now.
At the end of the day, with all of our searching, we have not found the school that ticks all the boxes.
The perfect school doesn't exist. I'm convinced of it.
I don't think it does.
Yeah.
And now here's the stars of our show, my mum and dad.
So every now and again something pops up on social media that just has to be talked about on the Happy Families podcast. And last week it was Rebecca Sparrow, a wonderful friend of mine and somebody who, if you're not following on Facebook, can I just recommend, check out Rebecca Sparrow on Facebook. She talks all about raising tween and teen kids, mainly girls, but a bit of boy stuff in there as well. And she's just fabulous. She posted the following, and I'm going to read the entire message. Okay, it's a couple of paragraphs. She says, a friend of mine took her son to a Year 7 orientation the other night at his soon-to-be new high school. The parents and kids were told that there was an expectation that the kids would be doing 90 minutes of homework per night. Then Beck says, 90 minutes of homework per night for 12-year-olds? Has the world gone mad? I wasn't doing 90 minutes of homework in Year 12. She says, meanwhile, another friend has a child in Year 12 who is now madly trying to memorise all kinds of information for the upcoming end of Year 12 exams. What possible benefit is there in forcing kids to memorise all this material? It's 2021, for Pete's sake. And I'm going to just throw in, has anyone heard of Google? Like, you can find whatever you need to know. And a Year 10 girl I know said she's planning to do the Suicide 6 in Years 11 and 12. We've heard our kids talk about this as they've gone through these senior years. That's the, back to Beck, that's the nickname given when you choose to do physics, biology, chemistry, English, Maths B and Maths C in your senior years. You know, says Beck, I see all this talk about how worried schools are about our kids' mental health. I see politicians talking about it and education boards, but we're running in the opposite direction to what our kids need. Sorry, but this is all BS. Our kids' well-being in their future careers are not reliant on single scores at the end of Year 12. Do not buy into that message. Year 12 scores are about school marketing brochures and universities using scarcity as a tactic. There are so many different pathways to take after school. Well, first of all, I love what Beck said, but have we got some stuff to talk about here or what?
So a couple of years ago, we had our kids enrolled in a really expensive high school.
It was sending us broke.
And
they're not there anymore.
We loved what the school had to offer.
Beautiful school.
And a beautiful community.
And incredible resources. And, I mean, it's the kind of thing that you look at and think, I want my kids to have this kind of a learning environment.
And for one of our children, it actually was a really positive experience.
Yeah.
But one of our other children really struggled. And she has anxious tendencies.
Yeah.
And we watched over a very short period of time those tendencies becoming more and more prominent and her feeling more and more pressure and weighed down, and she was just miserable.
Yeah.
Absolutely miserable. And so we made a really, really tough decision. Part of it was financial, but part of it was just looking at the kids and watching how they were dealing with life.
It was hard as well from an ego point of view, right? Because when you've got your kids in a really nice school, there's something nice about saying, oh yeah, my kids go to this really nice school. And like reputation kind of matters. So it was hard from that point of view, but we were drowning financially and the kids were struggling, especially this particular child.
And so we made a really, really big call to pull them out.
Yeah.
And we talked to them and gave them options of the schools that were around. And this particular child decided she wanted to go to the local school just around the corner.
Yeah.
And we really struggled with that. It was a really, really big deal for us to put her into a public school after she had been at this beautiful, very well manicured.
Yeah, and I think that it's important to highlight here. I always said that our kids would just go to public schools because my parents put me through a private school and all of my siblings, and it was such a waste of money. Like none of us did anything with the private school educations that we received at all. The private school education did not benefit a single one of us, and it just seemed like such a waste of money. But anyway, that's where they ended up for a range of reasons that we don't need to go into now. And just the difference of the local public high school and primary school compared to that school, not saying anything bad about it. It's just you can't draw a comparison because you've got this very expensive hoity-toity school with all the lush surroundings and it's just, you walk in and you go, this is lovely. And then you walk into the local public school and it looks and feels like a local public school. No disrespect at all. But it was such a contrast after what we'd experienced for the last couple of years.
It was. And just before the holidays, she received her report card.
Yep.
She's been there for nearly 18 months now.
Yep.
And she was ecstatic.
Yep.
pretty much straight A's.
Yep.
Straight A's across the board. She's in a couple of extension classes and has just absolutely nailed it this year.
Almost zero anxiety, just a little bit of self-imposed anxiety, but no anxiety from the school. There's no pressure from the school or anything like that. So happy. Great group of friends. Like, seriously, putting her into the local public school has been one of the best education decisions we've ever made for our family, right? Just so good. And the pressure has come off.
And the interesting thing is we've talked to other families from our old school who have all started to feel exactly the same way. And one of them in particular, I've been watching their daughter just get squashed, absolutely squashed with anxiety and all kinds of other challenges associated with the pressure to compete and to perform at a certain standard.
So this all started in about grade 4, grade 5. They're now finishing grade 8.
And her mum just sent me a message the other day and she said, tell me about the public school. She said, because I feel like we need to do something. We need to make a change. And my comment to her was just, at the end of the day, with all of our searching, we have not found the school. We have not found the school that ticks all the boxes.
The perfect school doesn't exist. I'm convinced of it.
I don't think it does.
Yeah.
But what I will say is the pressure has been taken off my child. She's performing at a higher level than she has ever performed.
And she's motivated.
Without the anxiety or us pushing her. Because like you said, she's absolutely 100% motivated.
I don't think I have ever, literally, I don't think I've ever said, hey, got any homework? Like, she just does her work because she likes being there. She loves being around her friends and the learning's actually enjoyable for her.
So I'm really interested in having a conversation with you about Bex Barrow's comments on social media and how that relates to this immense pressure that our kids are feeling at the moment and how we can help parents if they are watching and seeing their children feel this level of anxiety around performance and competition.
It's the Happy Families Podcast.
Imagine a home where discipline got results without anyone having to feel bad or in trouble. The Do's and Don'ts of Discipline is a webinar to help parents set limits with love, compassion and humanity. Find it now at happyfamilies.com.au/shop.
It's the Happy Families Podcast, the podcast for the time-poor parent who just wants answers now.
I really wanted to do that today.
Is that right?
Yeah, but that's fine. You've got it. Hey, we're talking about...
I do a really good job of that line.
You
I
do.
can't do any other lines.
If you practice it enough, you get there. Rebecca Sparrow has made a really big splash on social media in the last week with this comment about how much homework kids should be doing as they enter high school, how much pressure we're putting on them in terms of their schooling as they move through those senior years. And we've decided to weigh in 100% behind what Beck had to say. Kylie, how much homework did you do when you were going through high school?
Oh, I think I remember vividly taking a block of chocolate into my room one night and doing an all-nighter.
Right.
In grade 12.
Okay, but I'm asking how much?
Once.
Once. You did it all night at once. Okay. Well,
and that chocolate was my survival.
So I've written an article which you can Google. In fact, we'll link to it in the show notes about kids and homework. I can't say this clearly enough. Children in primary school, there's just no credible evidence at all for them to be doing homework other than reading, and reading shouldn't be homework. It should just be what you do. You shouldn't be rewarding kids for homework. You shouldn't be colouring in a colouring in wheel and saying, yeah, you got your 20 minutes. You know what happens when you say 20 minutes of reading, off you go? They spend more time looking at the clock. It's kind of like when my parents were forcing me to do 30 minutes of piano practice every day. And I just whinged and whined and I sat in front of the keyboard. I didn't really practice. I just watched the clock until the 30 minutes were up and I was allowed to leave the room.
Well, I think my parents thought I was really awesome at doing homework. What they didn't realise was I started doing my homework and I had really good intentions, but I always did my homework on the bed. And without fail, I fell asleep.
Did you really?
I'd always have an afternoon sleep.
Is that where you get that from?
Yeah.
Right.
Maybe.
Okay.
Well, that's how boring it was.
Yeah.
Honestly.
So
read a textbook. That's the fastest way to fall asleep.
When you look at what the research evidence shows, homework's probably one of the most reliable ways to make a child hate learning.
Yeah.
I mean, it just really is. And here's the other thing. Kids don't really see the relevance of what they're learning when they're doing high school. And with no disrespect at all to the wonderful, wonderful educators who are out there doing such a challenging job teaching our kids, I think that quite often education is as challenging as it is for teachers because a lot of kids don't see the relevance. They don't see the purpose. They're not really that into it. They just want to learn the stuff that they want to learn, and so much of what they have to learn doesn't feel relevant at all. I'm not saying it's not important. I'm just saying it doesn't feel particularly relevant. I literally remember zero from my from my schooling. Like when I look at what I do now, other than the basics of reading and writing and basic mathematics, very little of my schooling has been important for either my radio career or my subsequent psychology life. It's what I learned at university once I was at uni for the right reasons that became important. Now, I know that a lot of education in primary school and high school is important to provide the foundation for that university study. But gee, we push it really hard. We put so much pressure on the kids to get their grades up so that they can get into these courses at uni so that they can, I don't know, have the career that we dream that they'll have.
I was thinking about the last time I used anything from my maths class.
Your maths teachers get such a hard time. Let's just acknowledge maths is really important. And if you want to be an engineer or if you want to do something architecturally, anything at all to do with, I mean, maths is really, landscape gardeners, builders, they need to know how to do maths. It's really important.
Well, by the time I had to use anything from maths
Yes.
in life was obviously when our children started needing help with their homework.
And you got to about grade 4 and we're in trouble.
Totally. And I'd completely forgotten everything I'd learned anyway because I'd never had to use it until then.
Yeah, well, they changed it as well.
They changed it on me.
They don't do maths the same way they used to when we were at school. But here's the other thing, just this idea that that our kids' well-being and futures rely on the score that they get at the end of year 12. I love what Beck said. She just said, don't buy into that message. It's so breathtakingly irrelevant.
I think your life story and the life story that we've created has really helped take the pressure off our children as we have parented them. You know, you've shared many times that high school was not a place that you wanted to be. You almost dropped out, completely bummed out at the bottom of, the rung, so to speak. And yet, a handful of years later, realised that you actually have something to offer to the world and you wanted to do something, and that internal motivation to learn changed everything. It was a game changer.
So there's a handful of things to bear in mind when it comes to getting the kids into university, assuming that's what they want to do. First off, about 1/3 of Australians actually have a university degree. That means 2/3 more. In fact, it's 29-30% of Australians have got a university degree, which means that about 70% don't, and they're getting along just fine in the world. I mean, you don't have a uni degree. I think that you're still a pretty amazing human, in spite of the fact that you don't have that little piece of paper that says that you completed 3 or 4 years of study after high school. It's not the be-all and end-all. It's not the most important thing. And there are plenty of people who have extraordinarily successful financial outcomes as well in their lives without getting that university degree. In fact, sometimes it does the opposite. The university degree kind of puts you in a box and that's where you stay. So I don't think that we need to be looking at things and saying, my child must go to university. Why? Because I went to university, so everyone's got to go to university. Uni is not for everyone, and kids don't belong there. It's a place, I think, for adults, for mature learners who really know why they're there. As a former university lecturer, I can tell you right now, I used to love teaching mature age students. They were a different caliber of person. They had a couple of years of maturity or more, and they had this innate desire to learn. They knew why they were there, and they weren't messing around. They were there to learn stuff. They asked good questions. They submitted amazing assignments. But most of the kids that were straight out of year 12, not all, but most, they were a little lost. They were just kind of there because they had to be there. It was really exciting when there was some who were truly motivated, but that was unusual. They didn't tend to be highly motivated.
Over the weekend, Emily and I, our 7-year-old, went along to an outdoor program for kids, for young kids. And she was able to play in the mud and climb trees. I mean, these days, being allowed to climb a tree in a school setting is almost unheard of. And it was so awesome to see. They had spray painted the limbs of trees at, to the safe point. And so they had some rules, and it was just, you always had to make sure your head was below the yellow line. So they could climb the trees as much as they wanted until that point. And I just loved watching the kids navigate it, and then all of the loose parts where they could build things. And the life skills that our children learn if we just let them be kids.
Yeah.
Is actually helps them be curious thinkers.
Yeah. Play, explore, spend time with friends, figure stuff out together, tinker.
It just makes such a difference to their learning. We've stopped we've stopped encouraging our kids to be curious about how things work.
Well, we've got to get the standardised test scores up. That's why. Hey, so let's wrap this up with a final couple of notes on what Beck had to say. First of all, kids and homework. I don't encourage asking your kids to do homework. If they're motivated, if they want to do it, they can. If not, just make sure that they're reading. If you want more info, have a look at the link that we've put in the show notes. Secondly, when it comes to school subjects, don't worry about the Suicide Six or the toughest ones. We've consistently said to our 3 kids who are old enough to be making those decisions, and a 4th one shortly, don't worry about what your friends are doing, and don't worry about what's going to be scaled up or scaled down. Choose the subjects that you want to do most. And enjoy being there. Enjoy the learning. Enjoy the subjects. Enjoy the experience. Who cares what grade you actually get at the end of it? Just enjoy your schooling. Third thing, I reckon the idea that you're supposed to bust your butt as you go through those senior years of school to get the highest grade is pointless. I think that it's unfair to kids. It robs them of some of the best years of their lives. I would say instead, make sure that you have a go, get some work done, enjoy life, get a job, develop some skills. And if you don't get the grade that's necessary to get into the university degree that's important to you because the university's manufactured this false scarcity, then get into uni and follow an alternative pathway. And if it takes you an extra year or so to get your GPA up and to work out if this is what you truly want to do, I think that's a good thing, not a bad thing.
As we look back on your educational journey, there were times where we kind of looked at each other and go, why are you doing this?
Yeah.
Like, what's the point? And yet the reality is all education leads us somewhere. And so at each step of the way, as you learnt different things, it added to your capacity to learn more. If it takes an extra year to get where you want to go because you haven't actually worked it out or you just were kind to yourself in the process, is that the end of the world?
Yeah, I've got a book on my bookshelf called Range by David Epstein, and it basically argues that the more experience you get in life, the better off you're going to be later on. Yeah. It might slow you down in the short term, but it's kind of like the hare and the tortoise, racing on ahead, but being so single-minded, single-focused, narrow in what you're doing, it can actually turn against you as you get older, whereas people who have got a lot more range, a lot more experience, they tend to do better once they get a little bit older. Last point, scores. I've got to make one last point about scores. Scores lack relevance. No one has ever asked me what my academic transcript shows. No one's ever asked me how many high distinctions I got and how many, you know the old saying, P's get degrees. No one's ever asked me how many passes I got and whether or not I just scraped in. As it happens, if you're curious, I did get a first class honours.
Well, I was going to say, you mean you busted your guts for all of that and nobody even cares?
Yeah, kind of. Although, again, at a university level, if you want to get into the postgrad bits, you do kind of have to get the right grades to be able to there. But that's a different situation. We're talking about kids. We're talking about school-aged children. We're not talking about adults who are actually trying to develop their knowledge in a particular way. Now, some school-aged children want to, but for the most part, the scores lack relevance. It's the love of learning that matters. Well, we really hope that you've enjoyed the Happy Families podcast today. And thanks very much to Rebecca Sparrow for her thought starter on her Facebook page. Make sure you check out Rebecca Sparrow on Facebook. The Happy Families podcast is produced by Justin Rulon from Bridge Media. Craig Bruce is our executive producer. If you would like more information about making your family happier, visit happyfamilies.com.au.